Well, Sam, thank you so much for sharing your story and taking your time to sit and talk with us today. You've inspired many people and been an educator in broadcasting throughout the years, but I'm curious, who were some artists that inspired you on your journey?
That's a good question, Willard. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, I just want you to know how much of an honor this is. I always dreamed of being on the radio, but I never really dreamed of being in a museum. So God is good. But speaking of people who have inspired me, there's a couple of people that really inspired me. James Brown, the godfather, father of soul, is the one that inspired me to go into ownership. But Willard, before I tell the folks about James Brown, there's another old gentleman that really inspired me for many years. He was an old black comedian named Pigmeat Markham. I don't know if you know about Pigmeat. He came along during the era of Red Fox, Sanford and Son and all. But anyway, to make a long story short, Pig and his little sidekick, Baby Seal, were going to be at the El Rocco Supper Club that night in Greensboro. And I interviewed him. They came by the station that morning. I interviewed him. And after we got off the air, went back to a little office back in the back at the station and started talking about life in general. Now, folks, I can't talk about nobody, but Pigmeat Markham was a pretty rough-looking character. He's from Durham originally. He said, "You know something, Bro Sam? When I was a baby, I was an ugly baby." He said, "I was so doggone ugly that when we went out to recess, the kids would see me coming across the playground, and he said they would fall out laughing." And he said, "I found myself doing the natural thing to do, starting to draw up into a shell, until it occurred to me one day, wait a minute, I can make people laugh, something you don't see people doing much anymore." And he said, on that day, I decided to become a comedian. And he said, today, I'm a millionaire. And he said, "You know something, Bro Sam? I cries all the way to the damn bank." And the moral of the story, folks, is to turn your disadvantage into an advantage. I never forgot that, Willard. And I never will forget the closest I ever came to having a nervous breakdown was when Uncle Sam Vietnam was going on. Uncle Sam was after me. And I was in basic training. But 3 days later, it occurred to me, wait a minute, I might as well have a good attitude. Nobody's ever beat Uncle Sam yet. And the other thing is, what did Pigmeat Markham teach me? Turn that disadvantage into an advantage. And so I said, all right, I won't be making the kind of money in the Army they could be making in the real work, but Uncle Sam's going to do some things for me. He taught me how to fly. I wound up getting he paid 90% of my commercial pilot's license, my instrument rating, flying up in the clouds where you can't see where you go, multi-engine rating, and wound up being a flight instructor there for a while. So I turned that disadvantage into an advantage. Now, right quick, Willard, I want to tell him about what the Godfather of Soul did for me and how he inspired me to go into ownership. Does anybody in here know what payola is?
Yes.
You know what it is for those of you who are not sure. Payola, okay, I'm the little jock on the air, right? You're the recording artist. You come into my studio, slide $100 under the table, by the way. Look here, brother, I got a hot one. Smoke it for me. I didn't care if you had a piece of junk. I had $100, So what I would do, I would put it on the air, and if I couldn't stand the way it sounded, I'd turn the monitor down in the studio until it was ready to go off. But let me tell you why payola is so illegal. The James Browns of the world and the Otis Reddings of the world could afford to pay the announcers off, but the little guy just getting started couldn't afford that. It's not fair. And you see, music is like food. It's psychological. How many times have you heard a song today on the radio, you hated it, and 3 weeks later you found yourself going to the record store buying it? It got in your subliminal. Well, the big wigs could afford to see to it that the jocks, play their music. But anyway, so James Brown, to make a long story short, we were emceeing the James Brown show at the Greensboro Coliseum one night, and before James Brown had his business manager take care of the announcers, you had to go back in James Brown's dressing room and listen to this pep talk by the legendary James Brown. I never will forget. He said, you older cats need to quit acting a blankety blank clown behind the microphone and go into ownership and management and stuff like that. He said, tonight I'm worth $10 million, but I'm a miracle. You don't find situations like me every day. Go into ownership and management. And I can tell those older guys, come on, man, 2:30 in the morning, give me my bread so I can go home. But I was just a boy, 19, 20 years old, just getting started in the industry. And I never forgot that. Go into ownership. And we wound up getting the license to build our own radio station. I want to say this right quick. When we got the construction permit in 1982 to build WOIX, we signed on in June of '83, but I realized I have a construction permit from the Federal Communications Commission, but I don't have the money. I don't have the money to buy equipment, to buy the land for the transmitter site, operating capital and all. So to make a long story short, there was a little old guy. I was on the air in Greensboro, WEAL there, and the little old 14-year-old high school kid was in my studio. I don't mind people being in my studio as long as you can be quiet, you know what I mean? I'm trying to do a show. There's a difference between a show and a shift. But anyway, he was over there looking through my records, the 45s, and he started getting on my nerves. Hey, man, play this, man. You don't know what to play, but something told me to kick that little guy out of my studio and tell him to get on out there and don't let the door hit him where the sun doesn't shine. But anyway, something told me to be nice to the young man. And some years later, ladies and gentlemen, he became a branch manager, I think, of NC&B, one of those, And from time to time, he'd call me. He said, Sam the Sham, if I can ever help you, let me know. Well, ladies and gentlemen, he said that one time, too many to me. He called me up, Sam the Sham, if I can ever help you, let me know. I said, Paul, I need $150,000. He said, come and see me. And that young man is in the building tonight. Paul, stand up and take a bow. Paul Foster, ladies and gentlemen. He loaned me $150,000. That was a lot of money back then. It's a lot of money today. But anyway, Paul, I just want to say publicly, man, thanks again, once again. One thing about WEAL, you saw John R. on 1510. The frequency was 1510 AM, 50,000 water at night. The station went into Mexico. 1510 AM, when I started at WEAL, the frequency was 1510 AM. When I got my own license, guess what the frequency was? 1510 AM. If I was a gambling man, I would have bet on that number, man.
Oh.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. There's so many lessons in there. Just what kindness can do for you. And then that's just wonderful that those numbers just keep popping up in your life. That's something special. So, Sam, in all our time together and when we were talking, you gave such wonderful stories. And, I've got a couple hours worth of interviews from Sam. And as I was editing the video together, it struck me that Sam's story, when he's starting at WEAL, started in 1964, right? And so at that time in Greensboro and across the nation, the civil rights movement was happening. And so when I was looking up archival images of NC-A&T and Greensboro from the 60s, I kept seeing pictures about the Greensboro Four. I kept seeing pictures about the civil rights movement and marches and protests and sit-ins. And I was shocked that I never asked Sam about what it was like being at WEAL during the civil rights movement. So, Sam, you shared a really interesting story about one time y'all stopped a riot. Could you tell us about that?
I'm glad you asked that, Willard. It was when Dr. Martin Luther King got assassinated. And, of course, there's riots and burning and, shooting and everything else. And, of course, the curfews were on. But we were in the media. And we were permitted to be out and about. So to make a long story short, Prince Ike behind the mic. You saw a picture of Ike. He's almost your complexion, Ed Pfeiffer. But Ike decided he was going to go downtown on Market Street there, where they were raising sand and everything, and he had no business down there in the first place. But he went down there, and they thought he was white. They started throwing bricks at him and everything. So finally, he came back to the radio station, ladies and gentlemen, and all the disc jockeys were there at the time. He came back in that back door, as white as a sheet, his eyes that big around, and you could hear him all over the building when he shouted out, "Damn this." So the guys decided, and it was funny, but it wasn't funny. The guys decided that night, we decided we were going to do something about it. So we decided that we were going to get on the radio and have a big disco, a platter party down there on Market Street. We got law enforcement to to rope it off and everything. We got on the air the next day, and look at your mama, you and daddy-o. We're going to have a big disco down there on Market Street tomorrow night. Prince Ike behind the mic's going to be there, Slick Slack, Merle the Pearl, Sam the Sham, and all. We're going to have a ball. And once that is over, we're going home, and we want you to go home. And folks, do you know, after that disco was over, that riot was over. The mayor downtown jumping up and down, trying to get them to quit. The more he ran his mouth, the worse it got. But I learned that night the power of that microphone. That microphone is a powerful thing. So that was a story I'll never forget. We laughed until most of the guys are passed on now. The only one that's living is Slick Slack, who's in Atlanta now, and of course, formerly Sam the Sham. I've changed my image.
Well, you're right, Sam. The microphone is a powerful thing. We're just grateful you used your powers for good. And so you've also used your time behind the mic to mentor aspiring broadcasters. So I've just through the years been on the radio for different things, and when I shared with people that we were working on this project together, I had so many people contact me and tell me, "I know Sam. Sam trained me when I first started at WATA," or one of the guys that I do my monthly radio spot with at WATA, Bill Fisher, he's in the picture from the WOIX staff picture from 1983. So it's really wonderful, these kind of reverberations you've had in our community. And I think one of the best projects or coolest projects you do is your Young World radio show. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Right, the Young World radio show. Well, let me tell you this. When I left the farm, I went to A&T and, of course, started in radio in 1964. And it didn't take me long, folks, to realize, look, I don't have to try to keep up with these big old football players and all the muscles and everything. I'm that little old cat on the radio. Oh, Sam the Sham. Sam the Ripper, the lady's personal honey dripper. Now you know. But anyway, I realized from that experience, and I always thought about maybe doing, even though I hosted an Oldie Goldie show, I always wanted to do a kid show. And what happened, Hardin Park got a grant to start an afternoon, an after-school program for 6th through 8th graders. And they hired me to start that program and be the administrator and everything. And the criteria said do something that will help the kids come up to grade level and work with their attitudes and do something that would improve their self-esteem. So I started to think about what helped old brother Sam and his self-esteem. I said, I know what we'll do. We'll start a radio show. So the name of the show, ladies and gentlemen, was the Young World Radio Show. And the reason it's so great, everybody can't be a football and basketball star or the greatest in the school band. But we started, and what it wasn't a kid show, it was an adult show. We played music from the old school, but the exciting thing was that our local community youth were the rock and roll disc jockeys. We made little Sam the Shams out of them. Sam the Sham lives on, you understand. But anyway, we did that program for about 19 and a half years until, of course, COVID closed down everything. But I am so excited about a young lady who was one of our special co-host of the Young World Radio Show, and that show did everything from the kids interviewed celebrities, from the mayor to the superintendent. He or she was on every week, and the sheriff and the police chief gave a safety tip of the week and all. But one of the young ladies who was one of the students and one of the co-hosts of the Young World Radio Show is in our audience this evening, ladies and gentlemen, and she just got back from Hollywood with her dream comes true, and she seems to attribute her experience with the Young World Radio. Ava, come on down front. I want you to let's give her a nice round of applause. This is Ava Cutler, everybody.
Well, hey guys, I'm Ava Cutlip, and I am so happy to be here tonight with Sam, who was one of my biggest mentors growing up. I just came back from California, and I was able to release some of my original music, which has been an absolute dream come true. And I think a lot of it started when I started working with Sam on Young World Radio. So.
All right, let's give her a nice round of applause. Look for her in Hollywood one of these days, all right? By the way, her parents are here, ladies and gentlemen. As a matter of fact, I'm going to introduce her mom first, Ron. Cheryl Cutler. Cheryl, stand up. Cheryl has a wonderful, interesting story, and Ava interviewed her mom on the Young World Radio show first once. Cheryl, you were the lead dancer for who? The New York Rockettes, ladies and gentlemen. She was the lead dancer. How about that? And then there's her dad, Ron, who is a professional landscaping architect. And where's my buddy, Evan? All right, man. Let's give the Cutler family a nice round of applause. Man, I would like to recognize Wayne Underwood.
Okay.
Wayne, stand up, and you may want to have a, come on down.
Come on down.
But Wayne, and who is the owner of Mystery Hill. Mystery Hill was our very first client once we signed WOIX on. I really appreciate that. We operated the station for a number of years and sold it. Then Wayne and I and his son Matt, we bought it back and operated it a number of years, and we sold it, and then we moved the station to Mystery Hill. Wayne, I'm sure you got a few things you'd like to say.
Well, the one thing I always remember about Sam is his customers are the most important things to him. And he wants his customers to get the best quality that they can get. And he wants them to be the leader of the show. That's why he does the Young World Radio show and the Gospel Gym show too. But he's been an inspiration for us. We went in together and got the radio station, and it worked fine for a while, and then we ended up selling it, and we're still friends.
Yeah. That's a miracle. No. Prayer warriors, quite frankly, friends.
Well, that's one thing. When we started and bought the radio station together, the one thing that we did, we sat down, we asked the Lord what we're supposed to do. Me and my son and Sam, and I told him, I said, we're gonna pray, we're gonna listen to the Lord, and what the Lord tells us to do is what we're gonna do. And we got back together a few days later, and all three of us wrote down exactly the same thing. So we knew it was the Lord from that time. So, and we're still listening to him, Sam.
Yeah. Tell him about the young man who was going to commit suicide, and by him listening to the station.
Yeah, we had a guy that was going to commit suicide, and we ran into him later, and he said that if it hadn't been for your station, he said, I wouldn't be here today. We had the two ladies that were homebound, and they were planning on how they were going to commit suicide themselves, and they got listening to the radio program, and then they'd call us up for prayer, and a couple of times they told me, they said, well, we need this done, but we can't find anybody to help us do it. So I took my crew out. We went out and did the work for them, and they lived for several years after that too. Yeah. So it's good stuff. What else, Sam?
I think that's about it. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Mr. Wayne Underwood. Like I say, Wayne owns one of the major attractions, Mystery Hill, up in the high country. And if you've never been to Mystery Hill, folks, you got a bunch of people from Durham and different places. You've got to go to Mystery. It's got that room there where you can't stand up straight. Water runs uphill, balls roll up here. Go to Mystery Hill. Believe it or not, it's crazy, man. Yeah, all right. Before
we wrap up, we'd like to, Kim Smith has something she wants to say.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Kim Michelle Smith. I am the founding president for Our Legacies Foundation. We have the honor and privilege to announce that Mr. Samuel Tate is a Legacy Leader recipient at our organization. And what we're doing is we're compiling content to tell his story. He is so intentional about all the things that he's done. He wants to make sure that people will be encouraged, inspired, even when he's not here. He wants to leave behind a legacy. So it is just an honor and a privilege. We are looking forward to bringing more and more content and bringing Mr. Tate's life more and more to the world, because he has done great things.
That the work continues. We barely scratched the surface on Sam and his story. And now we have a wonderful award to give Sam here. So this is from the Watauga County Sheriff's Office, a certificate of appreciation naming Mr. Sam Tate a special deputy today. So watch out, y'all.
That's right. I'm going to arrest somebody tonight.
This was in recognition of his many years of love, devotion, and mentoring to those in his craft, and to the many friends, family, and community that he continues to touch, and from the appreciation as sheriff and the employees of the Watauga County Sheriff's Office, Boone, North Carolina, signed the Sheriff Lynn Hageman. So we've got Sam's certificate and his badge here that he can.
That's right.
He can display.
Folks.
So thank you all for being here tonight. And does anyone have any questions before we close for Mr. Sam?
Give Jimmy the.
I just had one question for Brother Sam Tate. With you having the radio station here in Blowing Rock in the mountains, did that help you reach Mexico?
No, we were on 1510, but only 1,000 watts, not 50,000 like WLAC. But you know what? Gospel Gems is going into Mexico now on the World Wide Web. By the way, folks, if you want to get a sample of some of the shows, if you'll go to www.gospelgemsnetwork.com, gems, Gems, like rubies and diamonds, and you'll know it's our webpage because it has a bunch of old antique radios. Scroll down to the bottom of that. We've got about 8 or 10 samples of Oldie Goldie Gospel Gems radio shows going around the world, folks. I can't wrap my mind around that.
Okay.
Oh, yes, question back there.
Sam, if I remember correctly, you first achieved national recognition in high school, growing up on a farm.
Glad you mentioned that, Barbara, because I grew up on the farm, but many of you here are familiar with the Future Farmers of America. Anybody here familiar with the FFA? Well, before integration for the blacks, it was the New Farmers of America. And I was the national president of the New Farmers of America with over 58,000 country boys in that organization. And ladies and gentlemen, actually helped negotiate the merger between the NFA and FFA in 1964. We went to Washington, D.C., and we were supposed to meet President John F. Kennedy. I've been in the Oval Office, and I was crazy about President Kennedy. But it was the week that his baby died, and he was out in Dallas, Texas with his wife, and old Lyndon Johnson came in like to welcome you boys, but it wasn't President John F. Kennedy. But that was quite an experience. I started off when I was a little boy in junior high school. 6th, 7th, 8th grade. I always wanted to be the president of something, but I was never elected president. I was always elected vice president. But when I went to high school at the age of 14, since I was farm boy there, they elected me president of the New Farmers of America at the age of 14. At the age of 15, I became state secretary. At the age of 16, I became state president. And at the age of 17, I was national president of the New Farmers of America. And if anybody's going to run for politics, I tell you one of the things I did. Our conventions were in Atlanta, of course, FFA in Kansas City, Missouri, and I went out there and represented the NFA there. But when I'd get off the elevator, and it made the maids mad, but I had my little flyers. I'd go down the hall, and every 15 or 20 feet, I'd throw one down on the floor or in the elevator. Now, nobody would stop to pick it up, but everybody read it. And the first thing you know, Sam Tate was a national president of the New Farmers of America. Thank you, Barbara. I'm glad you brought that up.
See, the story goes on. There's so much that you can learn about Sam and his life, and so it's just wonderful that our Legacies is helping document that and preserve it, because we couldn't capture it all in this one room or in this one video. Does anyone have any other questions before we close out tonight? Oh, yes, Mr. Fred.
Willard, thanks a lot for doing what you did, but I was driving down the road today, and I do some of the best thinking when I'm driving. I hope I pay enough attention. Hadn't had a wreck yet, but I was thinking about coming tonight, and I was thinking about Sam, and I'm the guy that talked about how the white boys in Greensboro listen to Sam. And that was everything I said came from my heart. But I was thinking today that in those days in Greensboro in the 60s, and Sam mentioned a little bit about things that were happening in Greensboro, and that's when they had the war set in and all this other stuff. But I think Sam and what he did brought the two races together more than anything else in Greensboro, just by him being on the air and whatever. And I think, you know, he ought to be recognized for just being who he was and doing what he did to bring people together. And I thank you, Sam, because I love Greensboro, and I grew up there, and I still do, but things weren't the best at that time, but you had a lot to do with keeping things smooth. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Fred. Thank you so much. Got to tell you this right quick, ladies and gentlemen. At WEAL, we always had the Little Miss WEAL Queen contest. Well, I mean, every year, you know, somebody and the winner could pick her favorite disc jockey to go out to dinner. I mean, sent the limo and the roses and all that stuff. But let me tell you what happened one year. Guess who won it? A little white girl. And like you said, Fred, it was in the 60s, and that wasn't exactly kosher. So some of the guys said, well, what are we going to do? I said, no, boys, she won. She's our queen. And I ran in, that young lady I ran into her some years later, and she said, Sam, you don't remember me. And I didn't, because she had grown up, and she said I was that queen. But let me tell you a little bit about, and we'll get ready to wrap it up. The reason most disc jockeys don't go very far in life, they always broadcasting instead of tuning in. So I'm going to sign off in a minute. But speaking of James Brown, he knew that I liked to fly. And he would always, I said, well, James, you mind if I go out to the airport and see your Lear jet? He had a baby Lear. I always wore my own baby Lear. He said, yeah, going out there. And that was during the time, during the movement, and he had one of the hottest records out that was played around the country on the soul station, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Paul, you remember that record? We used to play it. Paul was an announcer too. So I went out there, and the pilots were out front, and I said, Mr. Brown said I could come out and get on his airplane. And they said, well, Sam, go on and help yourself there. Or, sir, go on and help yourself. And the record, Say It Loud, I'm Black. But you know what, folks? I noticed James Brown didn't have no black pilots. I said, something wrong with this picture. You know what?